This morning, I'm going to read some of Abby Poyen's poems. I'm going to give a little background, and with each of the poems, I'll give a little bit of commentary, but I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum because this is going to take a little while, and I want to keep the time of these things down. There's a book that I compiled of Abby and Matthew's poetry. It's an ebook at this point. It's called Soulmate Songs, and I will have that link underneath. So there are several publications that Abby's poetry appears in, and it's not clear who actually submitted them, whether she submitted them or whether Matthew submitted some of them for her, or whether her plagiarist, Albert Pike, submitted them. So a lot of the ones that Albert Pike submitted were in the American Monthly magazine. I don't have a physical copy of that, and I'm going to be reading from my originals, my antiquarian originals, so I won't be reading any of those anyway. I have to go a little bit into the history of Albert Pike and these poems before I begin. And a lot of this is extrapolation from a whole bunch of clues. I just want to say that I'm very, very careful and very rigorous and open-minded when I put together these scenarios. This isn't just something that I slap together, through magical thinking. The evidence is in my two books. You have to read the books to see the research that went into this. But apparently, Abby Poyen at age 14, or even a little bit earlier, but probably at age 14 in 1830, possibly the end of 1829, began attending a class taught by Albert Pike in Newburyport, Massachusetts, which is very near her hometown of East Haverhill, Massachusetts. She was in Rocks Village. So she could have roomed with a family in Newburyport, or she could have commuted either way, I think. Albert Pike is someone you may recognize. There's conspiracy theories concerning him as regards bringing the Confederacy back after the Civil War. He fought as a general for the South in the Civil War, even though he was born in Massachusetts. He later on became, I think, the highest ranking Mason in the United States. I remember I can't remember the degrees, but he has kind of a checkered career. He taught school in Arkansas, and of course they're very pleased about him there, but there's other people who are not so pleased about him. He has been charged with plagiarism, probably by Matthew. There's an unidentified New York literary man from New York who said that he was a great plagiarist. He's quoted, but not identified. I think that was Matthew. So it's a long story, but apparently what happened is that Abby would write this brilliant poetry at age 14, being a prodigy. Albert Pike would go through her workbook and steal her poems and publish them. They just coincidentally had the same initials, AP. So I think that he would publish them under AP with the thought that if he ever got caught, he would just claim he was publishing them for her, for one of his students. Well, he didn't, or Abby didn't confront him about it. And so he later reworked and claimed all of that poetry for himself. Well, I've gone into that, and it's a very slippery slope, very tricky trail that this fellow left. He was pretty smart, but he wasn't quite smart enough. And I can prove, although it takes quite a while, I can prove that most of this is Abby's poetry. A little bit of it is Albert Pike's, and it's very different and not nearly as good. They're very different, Abby is a mystic. She's a young woman. She's very ethereal. She talks about the stars. She talks about heaven. She talks about mysticism and mystical states. And Albert Pike is a boorish fellow, who probably hunts and, became a Civil War general. And, it's a total mismatch. So anyway, with that said, most of these poems were either submitted by Abby herself or they were submitted for her by Matthew, either during her lifetime or a couple of them posthumously. And I'll give a brief introduction into those. And without further ado, I'm going to proceed This we've seen before. This is the New England Magazine, edited by Joseph T. Buckingham and his son Edwin. There are a couple of Abby's poems in here. The first one is in the September 31 edition, and where her poetry appears in the New England Magazine, it's unsigned. I know it's her by style and because Matthew has a pretty strong presence in this magazine. Again, I don't like to get into too much defensiveness about how I know these things. I've got a lot of research backing it up, but I could be here all day trying to present the clues and the case for that. So this is called The Merry Heart. Now I'm going to read these poems twice, I think, unless I nail it the first time. I'm going to read them twice and then edit in the best one. I might even mix and match if I have to, if I really stumble. So I'm not aiming for perfection in this reading, but I'm going to try to do the best I can. The merry heart of heaven's gifts I hold the best, and he who feels its pleasant throb, though dark his lot, is truly blessed. His mind, by inborn power sustained, upon the poles of reason turns, and in his breast the flame of joy diffuses incense as it burns. And glory's wreath and valor's plume have not a charm to banish care, and off the purple decks the breast whose heart Promethean vultures tear, the chain will gall you none the less because its links are massy gold. In vain you deck with gems the nest, whose threads have been in poison rolled. Quote, gold frets to dust, and beauty's bloom is slowly filched by pale decay, and genius feeds a wasting fire that eats its master's heart away. The poet's laurel oft is twined with branches of the cypress tree. Let others choose these glittering toys, but oh, the merry heart for me. From youth to age it changes not, in joy and sorrow still the same. When skies are dark and tempests scowl, it shines a steady beacon flame. And in the laughing noon of joy, this is still the better part, for light and bloom and azure heavens address in vain the heavy heart. It gives a wisdom plain and good, worth all the sage's learned laws, and from the rubs and cares of life, some food for comfort still it draws. When darkness reigns, some short-lived power but interrupts the general light, and in the shadows deep obscure, it sees a proof that suns are bright. It gives to beauty half its power, the nameless charm worth all the rest, the light that flutters o'er a face and speaks of sunshine in the breast. If beauty never have set her seal, it well supplies her absence too, and many a face looks passing fair because a merry heart shines through. If fairy time should e'er return to bless this dull prosaic earth, and some bright shape should proffer me her wondrous gifts of magic birth, I would not ask Aladdin's lamp, nor yet Fortunio's purse of gold, but something better far than these, the merry heart that ne'er grows old. You will see themes repeating, but clearly that's a mystic writing that. I mean, a real mystic. So that cuts the number of people that could possibly have written it down to a very small fraction. This poem, I believe, is written during a time when Abby was being persecuted for her mystical inclinations and interests. And this would have been 11 or 12 or something like that. It could have been written during another tumultuous time in her young life. But at any rate, I'm guessing, this is extrapolation, I think that her father brought in a doctor and she was given laudanum, which is to say opium. And that this poem is basically about the sleep that's induced by the laudanum. Now, there's a series that Albert Pike claims called Hymns to the Gods. I would guess, again, extrapolation from many clues, that this was a class assignment to write hymns to the gods, and that Abby took it up, and Albert Pike, seeing how good they were, turned it into a series for himself, reworked them, added in his own stanzas occasionally. So some of them, he may have even written some of them on his own. It's very difficult to tell. It's a mixed bag and trying to go through and identify which is Abby's and which is Albert Pike's is very tricky business. Someday, maybe scholars will be doing that. But this one, I think it was written earlier. It's difficult to pin down the dates, but this one I think is written earlier. It's not to any of the gods. It's to sleep. So I think this was a precursor, rather, to the poem To Somnus, which appears in the Hymns to the Gods series. So this, I believe, is Abby, with no interference from Albert Pike, writing on the same subject before it was ever revised by her to become To Somnus, and then reworked by Albert Pike later on. So I'm going to read, keep this water away from these books. As I make these entries, I'm increasingly aware of, I want to read from originals, but I'm increasingly aware how fragile these things are. To sleep. Thou deity of winds and waving trees, close friend of gushing streams and murmuring strains of summer music, unwound by the breeze from its devoted harp, whene'er it deigns, being of heavenly birth, to be for man a chorister, thou sitter on the sand, when ocean rolls his sluggish waves to land, pleased with the spicy winds thy brows that fan. Thou who dost hollow all the vines that run in flickering masses round the green-robed trees, rustling in music to the melting breeze, weaving a bower for thee against the sun. Who will not envy thee, O monarch, sleep? Thy throne is beauty's eyelid. Earthly kings woo thee with many prayers, their souls to steep with your sweet anodyne of woe. The strings of royal harps have sounded pleasantly to bribe your presence and your mild control. Emperors and victors render up the soul less willingly to beauty's self than thee. Thou hast a kingdom of thine own, bright sleep, and on the bosom of an upward dream, with clown or sage or king, as thou dost deem best, from this earth to that bright realm dost leap. Who has not seen young sleep as he reposes soft on the bosom of the murmuring south, as it rolls lazily o'er seas of roses, with tangled hair, shut eyes, and open mouth, a wreath of poppies wound around his brow, his robes upon the wind, while all around a waterfall of music with sweet sound lulls him in sweet oblivion, or now in glowing sun-gilt dreams wraps his winged soul and pillows it in heaven. O sweet sleep, come with thy draught of Lethe, bright and deep, and lift me in thine arms on that cloud car to roll. So that is Abby Poyen, unsigned, both of those. And I would guess that Matthew, who was regularly contributing to his old friend and mentor, Joseph T. Buckingham's new venture, the New England Magazine, probably asked Abby, can I submit these of your poems? And she said yes, but no signature, because she was adamant about staying anonymous. So that's that publication. Now let's look at The Essayist, which I have recently talked about. Again, it's not totally clear how her poetry got into this. I know that Albert Pike was friends with the editor, Joseph Light. I know that both Joseph Light and Albert Pike plagiarized Abby's poems. I also know that Matthew had a heavy presence in this. He was writing all the book reviews with a star. He was also writing a number of things in here as Franklin Jr. So which one of them submitted these, it's not clear, but I think Abby might have submitted, or I'm not sure. It's such a convoluted trail. I think that Matthew might have submitted at least one of them anonymously. I think that Abby might have submitted one anonymously, which then the editor put his own initials on. Several of these are signed AP. I think that Pike might have submitted those, in the same way that he submitted to American Monthly Magazine. It's a very strange business. I've talked about the history of this Ode to the Mockingbird before. This is 1832. This is the July 1832 edition. Pike claims to have written this poem to his biographer, but he claims the complete rewrite that he did 2 days after his marriage, which was 1834, 2 years later. But both poems show up in the compilation that his family published after his death, with this poem just slightly modified. So what in the world is going on? I say that this was a class assignment, probably right in the style to Ode to the Nightingale, something like that, except use a mockingbird, and that was the class assignment. And she wrote this, which has nothing whatsoever to do with Ode to a Nightingale. And it really doesn't have that much to do with mockingbirds, because apparently Albert Pike, being a plagiarist, his idea of a mockingbird was somebody that, steals other people's work like a mockingbird. And I think that's what he had in mind. She took it a completely different place. Now, keep in mind when you read this, first of all, there's lines in here that are very similar to the first poem that I just read you. And secondly, this Abby Poyen, this is the co-author of A Christmas Carol, and arguably the more important co-author of A Christmas Carol, the real one, the one that was written before Charles Dickens dumbed it down spiritually. So with that in mind, I'm going to move forward here and read Ode to the Mockingbird. O bird who dwellest in the lonely woods, far from all cities, where men dream of life, walking with blinded eyes, and dull care broods upon their withered hearts, and angry strife flaps her broad wings before the eyes of men, and gnaws upon their souls, and avarice halts out from his gold and misery piled den, and grasps men's souls with yellow, shriveled hands, and shrinks them up, and filthy gods exalts to proud dominion, worse than pagan lands have ever bowed before. And, clutching handfuls up of glittering ore, he makes of it, oh wonder, strong, firm bands, to bind them to his sordid service and cursed lore. Thou knowest none of this. Thy home is in the thick-leaved trees, and there thou hast thy nest, where the leaves whisper with a quiet din, and hardly moving airs may cool thy breast. And there thou fillest with many a tune the wood, singing unto the giant forest trees, and waking up the quiet solitude, sending about with never-ceasing flow a different strain on every changing breeze, running about as leaping waters go through every merry change, and making men for thy wild, wondrous range stop in their journeying, that they may know what emulous wild bird pours forth a song so strange. O thou philosopher, who laughest at all the troubles of the world, I would that I thy happiness could ever imitate, and far above all cares and troubles fly. Thou art not drunken with rich wine, but joy forever sits upon thy careless heart, shaking sweet influence without alloy from his light wings upon it. Thou whose throat surpasseth in its power all human art, who startlest each lone bird with his own note, as if thou wert his mate. O thou, whose song is heard early and late among the moving leaves to run and float, teach me the joyful secret of thy happy state. It cannot be that thou who now dost sing with such tumultuous melody, while round are spirits of the deep wood hovering, and drinking up with eager ear each sound, it cannot be that thou dost but conceal the troubles of thy heart with stormy mirth, nor ever at those gushing noises feel the joy thou tellest. This is but for men who walk about upon the care-filled earth, and pour out songs with heart-directed pen, making the earth admire, while they with their own songs grow faint and tire, yea, droop and languish at the soul, even when their words burn most with their prophetic fire. That's signed A.P. Let's see, I have a, here we go. Now, Abby's work also appears in the Philadelphia album, along with some that's clearly by Albert Pike, both of them signed A.P. Some of Matthew's early work also shows up in this magazine, reprinted from the New York Constellation, which he was editing and writing for. So this is a real conundrum as to who submitted these poems. They are signed AP. I don't know. I really hate to guess. They are signed AP. I don't know who submitted them. This one is kind of interesting. I'll see if I can get a shot of this. I really hate to hold these things up to the camera because this is the August 28, 1830 edition of the Philadelphia Album and Ladies Literary Portfolio. On the back page, there's a poem called Summer, which is signed AP. Then there's something to Agnes, which is unsigned. I don't know if that means that's also an AP or not. I'll have to look more closely at it. And the third poem is Christ and the Tempest by John Greenleaf Whittier. So Matthew's brother is right directly next to Abby's poem. Now, is that because Matthew submitted them both? I don't know. All right, I'm going to try to read this one. There's a quote at the top under the title, Summer. Summer is come, all pleasantness and sweet winds. I don't know where that derives. The summer is fair in the sunlit air and the distance of the sky, and merrily and sunnily the winds blow low and high. The south's at rest, and the bright pure west, and the wind that dwells between, and the leafy bowers where the silver showers, and the winds from heaven lean, and wander through and distill a dew on the lips of the waving leaves, and the cloud floats low and slow the sun his mist veil weaves, like an ardent lover to spread it over the brow of the silent moon. And there comes a wind, in its tracks we find at midnight or mid-noon. A charm it brings with its unseen wings, and its slight and dewy feet, and every flower with a golden shower of love its fingers greet. The bland southwest comes on the breast of the cloudy and stormy sea, and leaves it as calm with its silent charm as the upper heavens be. It comes on the dells, and the flower bells under its feet look up, and it shakes a dew of a silver hue on every fairy cup. It comes on the hills, and the summer rills are leaping faster along. It holds its wing over birds that sing, and they chant a merrier song. Its pinions are bowed on the idle cloud, and its fervors of warmth and love waft it up in the sky till far and high it floats like a white-winged dove. It comes on the eye where the fever mists lie, and spurns them away from their throne, and lights it again with a constant rain of love and light alone. It waves its wings with hidden springs of dewlight over the brow, and leaves it as bright as the pure delight of the clouds that run and bow before the car of the burning star that we have named the sun, when the early dawn of the blushing morn his journey has begun. The winds are here, and bright and clear the blue sky looks about, like a great sea, and silently the winds go in and out, and cloudy isles with sunny smiles are sailing on its breast, all over that ocean with a gentle motion and a state of moving rest. The bright sun shoots on the flowers and fruits his hot and life-winged shafts, and of odors and dew, as his beams fly through the air, he takes rich draughts. And his light is asleep on the hills and the steeps, on the green plains and the dells, on the ocean waves, round the hidden caves, with its brightness and its spells. And at coming of night, with a fainting light, the moon steals over the sky, and, like a maid, one half afraid, looks down with a timid eye. At night or noon, by sun or moon, beauty is everywhere, and summer is bright and happy and light and sunny and very fair. Magnificent. I feel it. I hope you're feeling it, because I feel it as I read it. This is magnificent. You know, she's 14 years old. Now we're going to continue with the Philadelphia album. This one I have made my own cover for. It had no cover, and I just went down to the art store and bought, the canvas, cardboard canvas made a cover. So first we go to the February 2nd, 1831 edition. And in the bottom right corner, for the Philadelphia album, so it supposedly was original for the album, under the correspondent, is a poem on that page and the next page called To Blank Blank. Unless I'm very, very much mistaken, this is Abby's personal private poem to Matthew. And Albert Pike, she wouldn't have written this for class. So Albert Pike had to have stolen it right out of her class book or her workbook or her portfolio, see? And you will notice here she has this same habit of starting out with a repeating line and exclamation mark. I read you before the Still Small Voice, which has the initials of the editor of The Essayist, George W. Light. And that starts out the Still Small Voice, exclamation mark, the Still Small Voice, exclamation mark. And then when he republished it in his little compilation book in 1853, he edited that out. So here, this is signed AP. So you get the picture. Both of those grown men are so shameless as to plagiarize a brilliant 14-year-old girl who's defenseless, against them. To blank blank. That smile of thine, when first the blessed beam of love shone from thy soul on mine, was like a happy dream that steals upon the wretched brain and brings it back to youth again with momentary gleam. That smile of thine has shone upon my way like a perennial fire divine, a vivifying ray. In part of nature's mighty God that lighted up the inert clod to live its passing day. That smile of thine, though fame had fled away, has never ceased on me to shine with its confiding ray. In misery and wretchedness, that smile has never ceased to bless my lone heart on its way. That smile of thine, oh, leave that unto me, and like the mist of noontide wine, the world beside may flee. Yea, leave me but that smile divine, and let me touch my lip to thine, and welcome misery. That smile of thine, let death at coming wear, and when he smiles I'll not repine, but fade into the air, and free from this insensate sod, rejoin the universal God, and love in memory there. This is a very interesting poem. She's an old soul, so she's writing as though she's old, but she's been through some terrible shunning, apparently. But Matthew has stood by her. There's a bunch of clues about this. Matthew himself, during the same period, 1828, she's like 12 years old, and she must have been shunned. I have an idea of how it could have happened. She got she got tricked into giving somebody a palm reading, I think, based on one of her stories. And she was charged with being a witch, and shunned by the whole community. This is in 1828, if you can imagine. Well, Matthew wrote 3 humorous pieces for the Galaxy, the New England Galaxy, called the Slander Club. And clearly, to me, what he's doing is cheering her up by satirizing the people who are shunning her. See, and it meant the world to her, I'm sure, to have Matthew in her corner. They're just friends at this point, really. Although she's in love with him, she knows they're going to marry because she's psychic, but he doesn't know it yet. See, he's her friend. So it's really, really beautiful, the backstory to that. Now we're going to go to March 12th, the March 12th edition in the same newspaper. Again, the correspondent for the Philadelphia album, signed AP. Now you're going to see Abby as a mystic, full blown. She believed that the stars were living conscious beings, at least in some sense. I mean, you could say that the higher counterpart of the physical stars are conscious beings, if you want to. She had studied high mysticism. But at this point, as I've said, Matthew he was skeptical about some of the things she was trying to teach him, including astrology. And apparently at this point, he had actually talked her out of believing in astrology. But she was not about to give up her love of the stars. You will see the stars mentioned in many of her poems, and when Matthew writes tributes to her, you will see the stars there. You also see Matthew signing as the stars. So stars are big here for Abby and consequently for Matthew. So here's where she really deals with this subject. This is Abby's defense of the stars and her belief of the stars. And we don't know what the whole poem was like because this is part of an address to the stars. So if Albert Pike submitted this, who knows how long the original poem was. We don't know who truncated it or what was in the part that was left out. Probably even more outrageous, mysticism. Part of an address to the stars. Ye ever-burning stars, I would that I might pierce the secrets of your deathless fire, and so drink deep of some great mystery, not waiting for consuming funeral pyre, but bathing deep in silver rain the high and unknown spirit which I feel inspire with mighty but mysterious influence this clotted cerement built and shaped of sense. High stars, I would astrology were true, so I might deeply pore upon your leaves, and roam continually on with you, entranced in the path of sober eve, nor error-chained be ever whirling through the mazes that dark superstition strongly weaves about the spirit's scope. For men have given, for knowledge, so men say, their hopes of heaven. Are ye not animate, eternal stars, who ever go like gods sublimely on, and he who duly on the eastern bars drinks of a dewy incense, the high sun, the sun-depending moon, the mystic cars of far-revolving comets, have ye none of the same soul that fills the earth-bound clod? Are ye not part of the universal God? O deathless spirits, ye are beautiful beyond our comprehension. There is naught of this inspired matter that bears rule upon this earth so beautifully wrought, so wonderful as ye. Are ye not full as this of life, divinity, and thought? So eastern realms have judged, and bending down, joyed in your smile, or wept beneath your frown. Ye are unswerving on your changeless way, and time hath over you no influence. Yet poor weak man, whose life is but a day, the sport of heaven's winds, is an intense, eternal spirit, an embodied ray of wisdom and eternity. But whence shall he assert, in overweening pride, that ye are lifeless sods, proud spheres once deified? I could pick this apart and show you that she's a genuine mystic, but I won't. One should never pick apart poetry too much. One should let it go straight in, Now, we have the Boston Weekly Museum, 1850. Boston Weekly's huge thing. And these poems were definitely submitted by Matthew for Abby posthumously, like 8 and 9 years after her passing. She died 1841. This one is May 25th, 1850. Really should have a bigger pillow for these. This one is going to be tough to read because it's been torn in half. I'll do my best. I have to hold it while I read it so that the two halves line up, But I'm determined to read from original sources. This is called Lilius, and it's signed by the author of Mary Mahoney. Now, Mary Mahoney was the very first of the stories that Matthew had published in this publication posthumously, and that one was signed AP. But this is definitely not Albert Pike. This is Abby Poyen, submitted by Matthew many years after her passing. So this is also, in effect, signed AP. Lilius is the Scottish version of the name Lily. This is Abby relating an anecdote from her childhood. Lilius, bright Lilius, silver-spoken Lilius, tell me where your ways have been. Tell us of the sights you've seen, wandering the day long, thus far away from all of us, nimble-footed Lilius. Oh, mother, I've been by the oaken tree, adown by the brookside o'er the len, far away, up in the mountains blue, and thickets and pastures and meadows through. I have been to look for the sylvan bands that you say inhabit beautiful lands. And mother, I sought again and again the plains and the woodlands o'er in vain. But I looked in the brook as I hurried by, and there lay the sunlight and the clear blue sky. I glanced at the flowers, and on every one was the light of a marvelous glory strown. And the grass blades, oh, and the very air bore token their footsteps had just been there. And was it so, mother? And would they fly from the mere approach of such as I? Or were they concealed there? The light that shone up from the earth, was it not their own? I think it was. Even the living glow of their very presence entranced me so. I think they dwell always, wherever bloom or the gladness of springing life finds home, and the beauty of verdure and flowing wreath is the raiment that God hath clothed them with. So Abby, as a little girl, was out looking for the little people because her mother, Scottish mother, had told her about them. And she was having mystical experiences out in nature, even as a little girl. Who knows how old? They lived in a rural area where apparently it was safe for her to go off all day into the countryside. Now, in the December 7th, 1850 edition of the Boston Weekly Museum, on the front page, the second poem on the left says, written for the Boston Weekly Museum, which means that Matthew submitted it. He sent it in as signed as AP without saying who he was, see? And then underneath, by the author of Mary Mahoney, which means it's signed AP. It's called A Noonday Cloud. All throughout our pasture grounds, over field and meadow, in the quiet of the wood, in busy haunt, in solitude, sleepeth somber shadow. Whence cometh it, this sober shade, thus everywhere so surely laid? What mystery has thus endowed with seeming life a fleeting cloud? The mystery of life's best trust, the spirit of all grace, a providence apparent still in every earthly place. Could even sunlight be more fair, were sunlight only in the air? And should we value turf or bloom, did never desolation come? Had life no shadows, earth no blight, could we half measure life's delight? Indeed, a logic lies of gravest depth in clouded skies. So that's all. I've got some editing to do. I don't think I'll make a lot of commentary here. Again, a lot of Abby's poetry is in the book, the ebook that I have available for sale called Soulmate Songs, along with Matthew's poetry. There's quite a few more. Again, I only read a selection from the ones I have physical copies of. So I hope you get a sense of what Abby was like and her brilliance at a young age. When I say that she co-authored A Christmas Carol, I'm not just pulling that out of the air. You know. Anyway, that's something for posterity, and I hope that some of you may enjoy it as well.